Yo, how's everybody doing?
Good, man. How are y'all?
What's up, Drew?
So good. How are you?
Good. We're in the final throes
Baby time.
of Brady being a only child. So August 1st is our day to go in and meet little boy. So we're pretty excited and nervous.
Have you guys picked out a name yet?
Nope, no clue.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're doomed. We knew that with Brady, we knew we were gonna name our first child Brady, whether it was a boy or girl, didn't matter. Like that was gonna be the name. And so with this one, we're like literally August 1st is the day. We're like, we have no clue. We've tried looking at everything we could and still like no clue. I hope they let us bring him home without a name because that's what's
Untitled baby number 2.
yeah. His name is Baby Brother right now. So
Baby brother. I love it. Oh, so excited for you and Alicia.
Awesome, man. That's so wonderful.
We're excited to meet
I think
him.
it's totally normal too that you haven't figured out the name yet. No rush.
yeah, no big deal. It's just a name, right? You can change it later, maybe.
Exactly. Just a name.
Yeah.
Although.
You're just named after your dad.
Yeah, totally.
Drew Jr. Jr.
Well, we really like the name Kevin, but the dog already took that name, so now we're just out of sorts. So whatever.
Kevin Jr.
Kevin too.
Can't have like a Kevin the dog and a Kevin the human in the same family. It just causes a lot of dynamic struggles.
That Kevin might need a lot of therapy after that.
Both of them.
Kevin the person.
Or Kevin the dog.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Cool. Well, that's exciting. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Do you have to like? Are you still going to work and stuff, or are you just kind of like you're waiting for the phone call? What's the deal?
No, I'm still going to work. So technically, like our due date isn't till like August 5th, and so we're gonna go in with like a planned induction on the 1st, just so everything's under like control. And so like right now there's no fear of baby coming early, which I guess I should be nervous. I don't know, but I just in my mind that's not going to happen. Alicia and I are both planners with every aspect of our life, and so we just feel like everything's going to go according to our plan. And we've learned more often than not, whether that's family planning or running or work or whatever it is, that is not how life works. And you'd think that we'd have figured it out by now, but you know, we're here making our plan to do it all on August 1st and go from there. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, still I'm going to work through the 1st and then take some time off. Obviously still be coaching, but not go into an office and be home and present and able to assist Alicia when she needs it. So that is the plan.
Yeah,
We're so
awesome,
excited.
dude.
We're going to be requesting a ton of photos.
Oh, okay. Deal. Give me 2 weeks to maybe resemble some sort of like horrible sleep pattern, and then we'll start with the photos.
Oh, we're just so excited.
Good thing you've done this once before.
Oh gosh, I don't know if that's a prerequisite for having more kids. I don't know.
I hear in some ways it gets easier, and then in some ways it's a whole new rodeo every time. So
yeah, Brady didn't sleep for about 13 months after she was born, so my training was shit. My mood was shit. Everything was just bad. And so I'm hopeful that everyone's like, well, every kid's different. Well, I'm hoping that this kid sleeps longer than 2 hours at a time, so that I can run and feel good and train and do all that stuff while raising a newborn. So we'll see.
Oh yeah, man. Fingers crossed that he's a sleeper.
Yeah, that's all I need. I'm like TJ. Like I have to have 8 or 9 hours a night of sleep or I am useless. And that's more than just running. Like I can't work. I'm a bad person to be around. Like I can't do anything. I have to sleep. It's so important. It's vital to like my being to get sleep. So we'll see.
I feel that. I feel that on so many levels. I'm so glad that I'm not having a kid right now. I would be a disaster. You'll figure it out, man. sleep is very, very important, but obviously it's not the only thing that we have going for us. We can take naps too if we need to.
Yeah.
I should have done that today. Well, cool. Yeah, it's so good that we've got over 20 people on a call. These calls have been pretty light lately, so I'm just excited that I see actually some people with their cameras on and I can see your faces. It's amazing. We were at a race over the weekend and got to meet a few of our athletes and support. Yeah, it was pretty nice to put faces to the names and everything. So if you are hiding behind your camera, know that we enjoy seeing your faces. And if you want to, just pop in, give a wave or something while we chat, we always appreciate it because we are at a lot of events, especially for Colorado athletes. So it just helps us to kind of remember who you guys are beyond a name and a training log and things like that. And at least for me, every time I try to coach somebody, I really try to like visualize their like face as I'm coaching, because it helps me to like give a more personalized experience rather than what I guess I feel like sometimes coaching over the internet can just be like, okay, it's this email address gets this plan, this email address gets this plan. And it's like, no, that's a real person. Ideally, you get to interact with them in real life too. So yeah, and I thought it was really fun to do that over the weekend. We got to chat with a few of our athletes.
So amazing just to meet people in real life.
Yeah. Well, cool. We have a lot of questions. We have not been doing a lot of calls because of life's happenings on our end, which is, just a normal part of being a human being. But we do want to kind of get through some of this stuff to make sure that you guys have I don't know, some new information, new perspectives, new outlooks to kind of get into the summer with. And huge shout out to the people who have been sending us questions. We asked, I think it was last Monday, for questions for these calls, and we've been getting a ton. Do not stop. That's not an ask for you to stop sending the questions. If there's no questions, we'll just ramble over here about random things not related to training. So the more that you guys give us, the better we are able to kind of meet your needs. And these questions were super awesome. It's not possible for me to answer every question that I got in today's call. We'll probably focus on 2 or 4. But just know, if you sent a question and we didn't answer it today, we will answer that question in the coming weeks. So there is something to look forward to there. And we thank you. We really thank you guys for sending these questions. Cool. We had an athlete who, well, actually, we've had quite a few athletes. We raced over the weekend, and several of my athletes, several of Zoe's, asked us to talk about our races on the call. This is something that we haven't really like directly ever done before, given like a race recap or a race report for our own training. I think at least for one, for me, I don't like talking about myself that much. And 2, I like coaching based on science and methodology and not my personal experiences. But yeah, this athlete was asking, she emailed in and wanted to know what were some of the key things that went well, or what were some of the things that didn't go well during your race. How do you train for such a difficult elevation profile? Yeah, I think those are a couple things that, I felt good addressing. And Zoe did too, as we briefly discussed this a little while ago. Yeah, Zoe, do you want to start us off, or should I?
Yeah, why don't you start?
Okay, perfect. Love it. Yeah. What were some things that didn't go well? I guess my biggest thing over the weekend really was I had a really poor night of sleep before my race. We camped out at a really nice campsite the night before. We like took time to drive out there early so we wouldn't be stressed, and like we did almost everything right that like we really could have, considering we had like a 3.5 to 4 hour drive, and the camping was very difficult to find and all of that. We got lucky. We got a campsite, and we were close to the event. We got our bibs. Like everything was going well in terms of preparation, right? Like as well as you could hope. But I did not sleep well, and Zoe passed out. Obviously, was snoring away, and I was awake the basically the entire night. I think I got 3 consecutive hours of sleep, which I genuinely sleep really well before races, but I tend to not sleep very well when I'm camping. So this is something that perhaps in the future, if I have greater control over accommodations and things like that, I might choose to sleep in a hotel or something before a race in order to get the kind of rest that I need. But basically, I was up all night, and I am the kind of person who responds very well to sleep. And kind of, if you were here in the beginning of the chat when Drew and I are talking about sleep, I don't do well if I don't have any sleep. I'm very impatient. I have like the human side to me is like gone. And so I feel like I don't have as much to give, especially at the race. So that was my biggest challenge at the race. And I did an extended warm up. I did a lot of hill strides to try to wake myself up. I had an extra cup of coffee. I'm pretty caffeine sensitive. So generally, if I have 1 cup of coffee, I'm wired for 6 hours. I don't really need a lot of caffeine. I almost never race with caffeine. Nothing really energized me, unfortunately. So the thing that went bad was that I was tired the entire race. I felt tired the whole time. What went well was that I kind of recognized the limitations, the performance limitations for me, for not having had a good night's sleep. And so in the beginning of the race, I immediately adjusted my tactics and how I was going to execute the race. I focused on going even easier at the beginning to try to give myself as much time to like wake up and keep my perceived effort low. That way, if you go too hard in the beginning of a race, it's very, very hard to undo that, especially if your perceived effort is very high in the first 30 to 45 minutes. It's not very good for your aerobic metabolism. You can become very dependent on carbohydrates largely. You're not burning as many fats. So your endurance is a little bit limited there. So I just went really, really easy. Unfortunately, doing that made it so that I would not be able to make up the distance between the guy in second and the guy in first. But that some days that is just kind of how it goes. Yeah, I think it was not always easy to maintain a positive outlook as a result of that, because I had pretty high expectations for myself for the race and being competitive. And it was a little tough to not be able to be competitive. But it was a good opportunity and things that went well, process-oriented goals, something that we talk about a lot. Focusing on fueling really well every 20 minutes for me, focusing on not using aid stations unless, I needed to, and knowing which ones ahead of time I was going to use and being very focused on moving through those quick aid stations quickly. So I didn't waste any time, nailed all of that stuff and really focused on, as much positive inner dialogue as I could kind of muster up, even though it was like kind of like a real back and forth kind of day, where, fighting the fatigue and really just kind of feeling very, very tired and wanting to go to sleep and kind of honestly just like not really wanting to do the race under those circumstances, and just trying to support myself and maintain the effort that I could maintain. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it was nice. It was very nice to finally finish. I was so tired. Yeah, learned a lot from that. You can get very far with process-oriented goals when you're having a bad day. So, definitely something that I will be taking on to my next race, and something that, even though that was like my 20th or 22nd race or something on ultra sign up. So it's probably like my 25th race overall, 26th race. I've done quite a few races, but I think this is the first time where I really had to like stop focusing on competing and just focus on like making it a training day and just getting it done, just getting the effort done, and being supportive in that process and not dwelling over the fact that like I was really tired. Okay, so yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think, first of all, for me going into it, I'm not really a 50K runner. I'm much more comfortable at the 50-mile distance. So I really just wanted to do something that felt a little bit out of my comfort zone and do a runnable 50K, because I did a runnable 50 in May and I actually ended up really loving it. Like I loved being able to push my pace a little bit more and like experiment with like really thinking of myself as a runner and trying to identify as a fast person. So one of my main reasons for signing up for this was because it's a really fast, or it's a relatively fast runnable 50K. And I also wanted to get in some time at effort at elevation. So it was like kind of, I selected this race as part of like a longer term kind of like I wanted to get certain things out of it so that kind of like no matter what the result was, it was going to be a really beneficial training day. But I also felt that I was being very vulnerable because, like a flat or a not, like not a crazy steep 50K is kind of out of my comfort zone. But, I was really fortunate. I got to race with a teammate who I'm friends with named Corinne, and she's a woman that I really, really look up to because she's very competitive. She's an amazing mom and has a full-time job and runs for Solomon and is just someone that and she's also a coach, and I'm just very inspired by her approach to life and running and like supporting her family and partner and just, like really prioritizing adventure alongside those things. And she's really freaking fast. And so kind of one of my goals was to like try to hang out with her, like to like compete with her and to like hang. And so I really did really tried to do some faster speed oriented workouts on the trails going into this 50K and just try to dismantle any kind of internal dialogue about like, oh, but I'm not a fast runner, or like, oh, I'm not a 50K specialist. And that was somewhat complicated by the fact that like the 2 past weeks at Trail Runner have been very, very stressful, and like we're in a big time of transition, and it's all like really good stuff, but it's just very stressful and very emotional. So I was kind of coming into it like with a lot weighing on me. But just really wanted to like run from a place of joy and gratitude and like run with these amazing strong women who inspire me. And so previous to the race, I had kind of looked up at like what the CR was, and I was like, that seems pretty fast. And then I looked at like Lucy Bartholomew had run it in like 5.5 hours, and I was like, no, it seems like pretty reasonable. So I kind of arbitrarily picked a time goal, which in retrospect I kind of wish I wouldn't have done. Because I started the race very, very conservatively. Like by the time, so like the marathon starts after the 50K. When TJ passed me, I was probably in 4th or 5th place. Like I started pretty far back, which is like what I really like to do. I don't like to be looking over my shoulder all day. I like to be able to execute and pick people off and try to like run people down rather than play defense. I like to be, I'm an aggressive offensive runner on the back half of races. And so I passed a couple women, and then I ended up on the climb running with this other woman who I know who is very strong and pretty good at climbing. She's not super good at descending. So I just knew if I could maybe hang behind her and make her feel a little bit timid on the climb and push, like if I could just kind of be on her heels, she might push the effort level a bit more. And then when we crested the hill, I would be able to just bomb down and do my thing and kind of enjoy the fact that like a lot of my running hasn't really been a lot of mountain running this year. It's been like a lot of dirt road running and speed oriented training. And I was like pretty ready to reap the benefits of that. And like for me, another process oriented goal I really had going into this event was to engage competitively up till the very end. Because when I ran my 50 miler in May, I was a little disappointed that I wasn't more of a factor in other women's races. Like the way that we kind of left the gate at the beginning of the race is the way we finished, and that isn't very exciting for an athlete. So I wanted to change someone's day. It was kind of my goal. Like I wanted to dictate the story. I didn't want to be a subject. I wanted to be the storyteller, and I wanted to be aggressive on the back half and not just survive. I wanted to, until I crossed the finish line, I wanted to be like running the show. And so that was like my real goal. And I was really proud of how I was able to do that. And I think it's mostly because I've done a lot of pretty good training in the heat, a lot of training on similar terrain. I don't think I've missed a run in like a year. I'm pretty consistent, and I eat a ton during races. I was eating like 400 calories an hour on the front half, and then I kind of tapered off on the back half just a bit and started relying more on liquid calories, but I was like very much like juiced up and ready to go. And I was super proud of my ability to like really battle with this awesome woman until the finish. And then I ended up like, when I hit the high point on the race, I realized I was probably going to be able to go in under the previous course record. And even if I wasn't going to be able to catch the woman in first, I got really excited of the idea of coming in under course record. And I really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I definitely pushed.
I feel like that's a great representation of when kind of like process and performance goals really align.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, because like I think, people always ask like, what's your strategy going into races? And I don't ever have a specific strategy. I have a process that I want to execute. Like, I don't think I'm going to run this fast until I get here. I think this is how it should feel when I get here. Here's how I want to feel. Here's how I want to think. Here's what I'm going to do. I don't put numbers on it. There's no like secret formula to like being good at racing ultras. I think you have to figure it out for yourself. There's no like algorithm that can tell you like how fast to run or like what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think like my ability to just run joyfully without a super strict agenda is what really allows me to like do better on these races. Cause like I'm not beholden to like a spreadsheet. I know how I want to feel and I know how to make that happen. And that's what I do. And I don't overcomplicate it. Like I'm a chronic overthinker until race day. And then I'm just like a snack machine.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cause yeah, you really do overthink a lot of this
like
stuff.
I'm a hugely anxious, stressed out, overthinky person. And then as soon as I'm able to run, like all of that melts away and I'm able to just like jam out and eat waffles and like it all just falls away for me.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Cool. Yeah, I hope that answered the question that any questions that you guys had about at our races. Yeah, there's a thing in here about the elevation profile.
I love that is my ideal elevation profile. It's very straightforward. It is up and then it is down. I freaking love it.
I disagree with you on this. I think that was flat. It was too flat for my personal preference because it was like 3,000 feet of climbing in 8 miles. And for me personally, I really don't enjoy that like grindy, runnable 6% grade at 12,000 feet.
That is
like that just
that's
doesn't
my favorite.
Feel good. I'd rather have a much steeper, much more, where it's very like clear, like you're power hiking this because it's 12% grade and you're at elevation and you're going up steeply and quickly to the summit rather than winding around and doing this like lollygagging thing that was in the race. I felt like that. I think, well, both of us, we both picked this race because we wanted to do a race at elevation to prepare for another race. And although, for both of us, like, we don't really go out thinking like too much. We don't really think about like A, B, or C race anymore. Like when we pick a race, we tend to go out and try to compete because we're not racing that much.
Yeah.
Like, we're not racing that much. But, I thought, that elevation profile, at least for me, was really similar to kind of some of the training that I've been doing during the weeks, not so much on the weekends. But yeah, it was, I think that was kind of a push for me, just because it wasn't like clear. It wasn't clear if it was going to be like power hiking or running. And I don't like that ambiguity at all. Like I feel very comfortable power hiking and a lot less comfortable on like a high elevation, like very
Yeah,
runnable terrain.
I have a really good low gear. Like I may not be all that fast, but like on kind of stupid terrain, I'm really good at not necessarily continuing to go fast, but continuing to like run when other people are hiking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's totally just economy. Like I don't do anything fancy. Like
Nope.
you know, I think that I just spend more time trying to like develop good turnover and good economy, and that's all it is. Like,
well,
I'm sure other people run more miles or do more vert, but I think, you know, that economy based training and like just little hill strides totally made the difference for me.
Yeah, and I would say that that's really no different from what most of our athletes are doing,
Exactly.
you know, most of the time, you know.
And that's why like I you know, I never power hike during the week. Like
yeah,
we try to avoid adventure unless we're you know, unless there's a reason for it or it's going to bring us great joy. We rarely intentionally practice power hiking.
Yeah. And I think with the caveat that, you know, we have been doing a little bit more power hiking because we have a really big race coming up at the end of August that is not going to be
Right.
runnable at all, really. It's going to be a lot of power hiking.
Right. But like,
but you know, we don't have a lot of intention to
Yeah.
do that like all the time because the better principles to work on are like your turnover, your leg speed. Because when you get into like that ambiguous, like 6% to 8% grade at 12,000 feet, you know, the one thing that keeps you running is your leg speed and your turnover. And you've had to have worked on that in your training. And that's what's going to allow you, you know, allows both of us to run that terrain. Even if we're not practicing like on that specific race course, or like even if the terrain that we've been doing that's more runnable but climbing here is at 6,000 feet, not 12,000 feet. You know, it's like doing your strides, it's doing your hill work. It's focusing on like light and kind of quick strides when you're out on your easy runs, rather than like plodding and overpowering long stepping strides. You know, those things crush your efficiency. It requires so much energy to like move like that. And actually something that I notice is that, you know, a quicker stride rate, even when you're power hiking, can be really effective and much more efficient than doing these really long, like lunging steps up the mountain. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, let's move on. I need to stop dwelling on that poor sleep. All right, let's see here. I love this question. When I think about the hard emotions and experiences that I encounter on the trails, what underlies most of it, and certainly most of the mental upset and discomfort, is fear. Fear that I won't be able to finish or won't finish as well as I'd hoped. There is fear of embarrassment, physical pain, and further mental turbulence. And what makes it all tougher is that I get scared so much more easily when I'm tired. The more fatigued I am, the easier it is for fear to take over. How do you guys or any other teammates out there, please use the chat box to chime in. How do you guys deal with fear during big efforts, especially as you get more fatigued? This kind of is a very relevant question, considering, you know, the talk about our races.
I love this. And I think the first thing I want to say about this is if you never feel fear, then you never get to be brave. Like bravery is only something that you can experience in the presence of fear. So like you can be grateful for it in a way, because it's a cue for you that you have an opportunity to experience a very positive thing out of it. Like if I didn't feel fear around doing a fast race and maybe having some amount of like shame or embarrassment around like perceiving of myself as slow or performing poorly in front of my peers, then I wouldn't get to be brave and like encounter that. So fear isn't a bad thing. It can be a very useful, all emotions are for feeling. So don't discount any of them, but also don't always put them in the driver's seat, right? You can just like acknowledge like, yes, I feel some amount of fear around, you know, not finishing, or some amount of fear around embarrassment. And the things I would say to that is like, each fear is kind of different, but fear of like embarrassment or shame, like that's like a totally normal thing that everyone feels, and you can't let fear of those things make decisions for you. And so like some fears, I think it takes like recognizing like this, fear is trying to tell me something about this, or like if you're scared of not completing something, maybe that can tell you something useful around like preparedness and how you can be a little bit better prepared. So I think that there's a couple different ways to encounter it, but I think recognizing fear but not letting it drive the car is kind of is how I deal with things. Like I try to feel gratitude whenever fear comes up for me, because that's how I know I can lean into that difficult emotion.
Yeah, I think fear can sometimes also be part of your compass. It can kind of direct you towards things that have deep meaning for you, and be a sign that you care about something. So approaching that fear, those feelings with a little less self-criticism or self-judgment, maybe based on that perspective, could be helpful too. um, it's hard when you get tired, right? Because self-doubt creeps in. And that is really normal. I think especially during a race. That's something that if when you're tired, you doubt yourself, because things just don't feel as good. And that's kind of I think that is the reality that most people face if you're not equipped yet to deal with it, or if you have yet been in a position where you've overcome feeling tired, and seen that there can be light at the end of that tunnel, especially in a running context. So yeah, try not to judge that and be more curious of what lies kind of beyond that. Like as I said, like at my race over the weekend, I was tired from the beginning, and you only get more tired as the race goes on. So when you get to the top of the mountain and you're at 13,000 feet and you're like, oh wow, I have all this downhill, but you feel tired and you can't do anything with that. You're like, everybody experiences fear. It can be your 25th ultra or your first ultra. If you're not feeling that good, sorry, our dog likes to try to fit in a 2-inch diameter space beneath our feet and run everything over while we're talking. Yeah, it's normal to feel like that, especially if you haven't like experienced going beyond that. So again, I think, something that I try to implement in those moments is like process-oriented goal. For me, it's usually like keep your feet moving, keep fueling, keep your feet moving, keep fueling, and kind of like use a bit of a mantra. I just try to get that fear thought out of my mind. Like, I'm not going to make it to this aid station. I was like kind of feeling like that during my race. Like, I need that aid station. I'm not going to make it. Well, forget it. Just every time I strike my right foot, I feel great. Every time I hit my left foot, I feel great. And I just keep repeating that. I feel great. I feel great. I feel great over and over again. And even if it only works for a half a mile, and for a half a mile, I feel a little bit better than I was feeling in that moment, it's working. And then, you start to feel tired again, you have another gel, you just, use a mantra, fall back on positive self-talk, get yourself through that next half mile, find that little bit of light that exists on the other side. I mean, the great thing about some of these races, your long runs, you have an opportunity to be out there for a long time, so you can explore that, other feelings other than fear or discomfort and fatigue exist on the other side if you're patient and willing to engage in the proper inner dialogue to help you get there.
And like a lot of these things, like embarrassment, shame, pain, like those are unavoidable circumstances of being a person, and letting fear of those things dictate your life is going to not be that fulfilling. If you're afraid of pain, this is like not a good sport. It's not like you should be in pain all the time, but if you need to have a really honest conversation with yourself. Like anytime I sign up for a race, I let myself know like there are going to be moments of discomfort. You are here for this. Like you are smart enough to know the difference between I am injured pain and this is a normal part of running an ultra kind of discomfort, and you are going to encounter it and get through it, because that is the point of this. It's not just a side effect. It is the point, is
Yeah, it kind of
to
is,
encounter
right?
that.
Yeah. And
Like
to
if
get
you're hoping
comfortable
to
there.
avoid pain, this is, like running a 5K is immensely painful, like that's kind of part of it. And it's not, I don't want to over glorify the pain, but being afraid of it just adds to the anguish. So get rid of the fear and say, like, I'm going to experience this. I am ready. I will work through it.
Yeah. CT, I like your tips here as well. Very process oriented, thinking about stride, breath, posture. I think if if you're in a race and you think about your posture, you hold yourself upright, that automatically, that posture change brings more confidence, kind of to your self-conscious. And that can start to, become an expression of what you're doing out there. So you start to feel better. Again, like, ultras are so profoundly uncomfortable. Sometimes I'm like, I don't recognize any of the joy that Zoe gets from like the being out there. I'm like, man, I haven't had a runner's high in so long. Like, I really wish I could grab onto that in the same way that Zoe does. But like, two different athletes, two different people, you can't replicate any of these things. You need to kind of try a bunch of stuff and figure out what works for you. But I think it's important to like really acknowledge that like fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, that is kind of a serious part of doing things that are really difficult, right? Like if anyone could do this stuff, they would be, but you guys are doing it because you're hard workers, because you're willing to see what's on the other side of that, get curious about it, and kind of, I don't know, almost kind of, I like to kind of like smile or laugh at like the suck out there, because you literally chose to put yourself in that position. Like I didn't have to race. I knew how it would feel.
There are people
to
that
race
get
on 3
brunch
hours
on
of sleep.
Saturday.
Yeah, I know. Like I could have just sat at the finish line and waited for you.
Could have had a mimosa.
But I chose to embrace whatever the circumstances were and use that as an opportunity rather than drink a mimosa. Which at the time I may have fantasized about a mimosa or two out there during my race.
Think, like for me, bringing up those challenging feelings like fear or self-doubt, those aren't bad things that we have to like push out of our mind. They are cues for you to experience the positive flip side. Like fear is your cue to experience bravery. Self-doubt is your cue to experience self-belief. Self-belief can only exist in response to doubt, right? Like that's a response that you build in response to one thing. Bravery is something that happens in response to these, again, like not so positive emotions. So recognizing them, naming them, accepting them, accepting yourself, and then intentionally choosing the positive response is like, I think the framing I would leave people with.
Yeah. And I think there's just Sarah, she states, it's just like, it sounds so obvious, but it's, really important to hear this. But like, if you're not feeling good, do something to change your circumstances. And you guys can kind of read what her tips are there, but they're really great. Danny also is like, kind of just laugh and smile at the situation. Again, like that stuff is huge. And sometimes just like, even just like faking a smile or supporting another runner who is passing you or you are passing them, that kind of positivity can help lift yourself up, put it out there, thank the people at the aid stations. That's something that like I always work on during my races. It's like, no matter what, every time I pass somebody, I tell them something positive. Every time I go to an aid station, I thank every single person individually who's working there. And like, I don't, that's just like a way to kind of like maybe raise your vibration, make yourself feel better, however you want to kind of phrase that. But it helps to kind of, for a time, compartmentalize the fears, change your habit in that moment, and puts you on a path towards like maybe getting through that low moment. I want to talk to the other coaches because they are also really experienced in this stuff. Either Drew or Kristen. What do you guys think?
I just want to mention real quick that fear oftentimes is looked at as something negative, or at least has a negative connotation. And it's really important to understand that fear is, in my opinion, is a good thing. It shows that you care, whether it's about your body or your positioning or like whatever your endeavor is. It's okay to be afraid. I would almost want you to be afraid, because like Zoe says, it means that you're reaching out outside of your comfort zone to do something that could be really spectacular and really amazing. And that's important. As it pertains to letting fear kind of take over a hard effort, obviously that's not important. Like fear is oftentimes a catalyst for a lot of that negative self-talk and just negative mental imagery. The idea is that if you're able to, like Zoe already said, like TJ said, is to prepare and try to mitigate a lot of those fears that you have surrounding your hard effort in your training. All of us aren't just like signing up and being like, all right, I'm going to train for 2 weeks and run 50 miles. You spend months, if not years, preparing for an event to help mitigate some of those stressors on race day. Now, obviously, stressors and fears are present. I mean, we've all been there, we all understand, but kind of spending a lot of time pre-race, maybe going through and meditating on it and deep thought and thinking about different scenarios, like what could come up, and just trying to make sure that you're mentally prepared as you are physically for your athletic endeavor, just so that when something happens that's, man, I'm falling off pace, I'm feeling like I'm going to bonk, I've still got to go 6 more miles to the next aid station. You start these things start coming up, I should say. You're like, well, I in a way, I'm mentally prepared for this to happen. So this is what I am prepared to do to get through this, you know, hiccup, so to speak. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, that visualization process ahead of time is an absolutely vital component to executing kind of the race that you're looking to, to doing well, to pushing your potential. Yeah, thank you, Drew, for bringing that up, because neither of us mentioned that, but that's something that I know that I practice, and I know that Zoe practices responding to different kinds of adversity and challenges out there. And she's the one that really turned me on to using process-oriented goals to, start to help you, react to the things that go on, like during races, the tough moments and the challenges that come up, and all the problem solving that it takes to kind of run a good race, especially the longer races. Kristen.
I mean, you guys have said so many good things. I think that for me, when the gremlins come out, I think that one thing to remind myself of is like, you can always, ask like, oh, this is going wrong, this is going wrong, all these things are going wrong. But taking a minute to zoom out and ask yourself, like, okay, if I do this well, what could go right? Or if I fuel properly, how will that help me in the future? Even if you're doing a long run or a race simulation, or even I guess in a race, it would apply too. If you're, if you're at mile 15 of a 50 miler and you're just like, oh God, this sucks. It's like, eat, drink something, change your pace, do something, because like if you do something now that will benefit you later, you're only going to set yourself up for success. So just trying to stay positive and kind of like, I don't know, I think this like Ted Lasso quote that has been brought up here before was like, instead of being judgmental, try being curious and asking like, what could go right? What good thing could come out of this?
Yeah, I love that, because so many times, at least for me, when I'm like in a moment where I'm feeling like during the race, I just wanted to go to sleep. Just was like, I'm done. I want to go to sleep so bad right now. And I would just be like, all right, just have one more gel, because probably in 10 minutes you're gonna feel a little bit better, and that's 10 more minutes of running, 10 more minutes closer to that finish, and ride that wave for as long as you can, and then another gel, because you'll probably feel better, and just kind of try to ride it as much as you can. And I think that's really important to realize, like, what you're doing in response to that can change your circumstances if you're willing to be patient with yourself and to not give up.
And I promise that when we are all fueling to our potential, mental lows are much less prevalent.
It's so true.
Like
right?
half the time athletes think they're having a mental low. I'm like, I swear, if we took a blood test right now, we would be like, oh, this isn't a mental problem. Look at your freaking blood sugar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So like, don't even, like, if your first thought is I'm weak, make your first thought, I need to eat a goo. And then you can make your third thought, I'm weak, you know? But like, we need to insulate that with like 200 calories before we even get there, because I swear to goddess that like half the time people think that something physical, it's just because they're not meeting the needs of their metabolism.
Totally. Yeah. I
Like life is easier when you are fueled. Everything is easier. It's so much easier.
All right. Let's move on to our third question. I wanted to get at least a couple of these in. As usual, we're going
Real slow.
yeah. But these are just such good topics. And thank you. Thanks for the mention about adventuring imperfectly. That's also another really good framework for all of this stuff. I recently read the book Grit and have been reflecting on interviews I've listened to with runners, especially those who discovered running later in life and have really excelled at it. I'm wondering what the Microcosm coaches think separates committed runners from competitive runners. Is it drive, grit, enthusiasm, skill, life circumstances, good coaching, or all of the above and then some? Let's start with Drew and Kristen on this, just because, I don't know. I really want to hear from these guys.
No, that's okay. I was thinking about this question, and it is kind of tough. You kind of have to get down and understand like what is a committed runner and what is a competitive runner. I feel like a lot of your more competitive runners are obviously very committed, very talented individuals. But then you can be a competitive runner and not be, I guess, or you can be a committed runner rather, and not be super competitive, if that makes sense. Like I could throw this in the same book, but myself included. Like if I go out and run, a very committed runner, I do everything I need to do. I feel, and that doesn't always necessarily translate into being a competitive runner as it pertains to like standing on the podium at the end of the day, like Zoe and TJ this past weekend. And so it's kind of the crux of the whole question is like the difference between those to me. But when it comes to, I guess, what separates them, to me, it's talent. I don't know. Like, I just feel like that's the biggest deal. Kristen might know more than me. This was a tough one, but just, I don't think that there's anything wrong with someone who's committed that doesn't necessarily end up being competitive on a podium. You may be more committed than someone that is competitive. And because you don't get to stand on a podium and smile big and post pictures on Strava, it doesn't mean that you're less of a person or less of a runner.
Well, less competitive, really. Like
that's
results
true.
to me
It depends on what you're competing for. Like, are you competing against yourself to PR? Like, what is the competition? Yeah. That's a good call out. Standing on the podium isn't the only type of competition there is. But Kristen, what do you think?
I agree. I think that I think that they don't necessarily go together and they don't necessarily belong apart. But I think that if you're a committed runner who also wants to be competitive, you know, stop missing your runs, start taking care of yourself, do the maintenance, do the workouts, make sure you're fueling enough. And like eventually I feel like anyone can be a competitive runner if you take the steps to get there and you work with a coach who knows what they're doing and you like do your due diligence in making that progress and sort of trusting the process. But I also think that there are people who are very committed to being competitive runners without actually committing to the work that it takes to be a competitive runner. So you can have these huge lofty goals and set yourself up for, you know, these monster weeks of mileage, but if it's just mileage on the calendar and you're not actually putting that mileage in, or you're making excuses for, you know, I just didn't have time to get that 30-minute run in today, I think that that's a different conversation. So I think deciding to be committed is the first step. You know, like committing is the first step to being a competitive runner. If you want to be a competitive runner, you have to commit. It's not a lot of ways around that in my mind. I think that there's I think, yeah, to Drew's point, the word competitive is equal to the word elite, and it's not necessarily the case. I absolutely agree with you, Drew. And I think that maybe that's something in our vernacular that we can change, that we can work on changing, that we can be more aware of when we talk about elite athletes, competitive athletes, you know, committed athletes. It's all, it can be taken in so many different directions.
I really like both of your guys' answers though, because you can be competitive without being committed, and that's somebody who's very genetically gifted, and we would say that that's a talented quote unquote person. But I think that talent only gets you so far, and that if you really want to access your potential, you first need to do the little things that equate to, you know, somebody who is committed, you know, a committed person. It's consistency. It's you know, paying attention to your diet. It's having the habits with foam rolling and stretching, doing your PT and your strength work. It's being consistent on all those levels. It's not over grasping the training and living like a monk life existence and only being a runner, but it's owning your running and your training, and your goals in a way that kind of formulates habits and routine that sort of set you up to be able to access whatever your talents are. I'm a big believer that talent is not necessarily something that is expressed when you're first born. You know, everybody on this call is a talented runner. It's, are you willing to work long enough to express your talent and whatever your talent is? If you're unwilling to work long enough, if you're unwilling to check into your training log 5 days a week, if you're unwilling to answer the questions that coaches ask you, if you're not going to put the work in on your end, you're not going to discover who you are in an athletic sense, not fully anyways. That's the truth of it. And I think sometimes that's difficult for people who aren't as engaging and more reliant on running history or talent or speed that they've had their whole life. Well, guess what? You can do better. You can cultivate what you already have and make it better. Or you can come here as someone who's never run a 5K and run a 50K and be a mid-packer, or even graduate to top 20, 10, or podium if you're willing to give it time. You know, I think myself, Zoe, Drew, Kristen, we probably, if you asked us, probably wouldn't identify as like, we're super talented runners, but like we all are competitive runners, and it's because we're committed runners, and that allows us to for our talents to express themselves, whether it be, you know, having like whatever. Zoe has more ability to stay hydrated than anyone I've ever met in a race. She can eat more than anybody without having stomach distress.
It's my talent.
She has so many undiscovered talents that she didn't even know about like 2 years ago.
I'd always thought that I was a gifted eater.
Yeah, well, whatever. Always contradicting me. Anyways, I think you guys get the point.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like your word is your bond in a lot of ways. And like if you tell yourself you're going to commit and you know, and you do, there's only good things are going to come from that. But if you are constantly saying, I'm going to do this, and then you find an excuse not to, or a reason not to, then you're not even going to believe yourself, you know? So it's like, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with like the positive, like self affirmations of like, I'm a competitive runner, I'm a committed runner, I'm an elite runner. And then you have these actions to back up those statements.
Yeah. And I think that also really helps you work through those fear states that develop around stepping into bigger races, or developing performance goals that exist outside of your process oriented goals. You know, when you've put the work in and you can look back and say that you've done that, you have this history of experiences that you can use to then kind of bolster your confidence and kind of confront some of that fear, so you can go out and execute in a you know, in a really strong way, like Zoe did over the weekend. You know, that wasn't just like, over the course of a week, she developed all these ideas about how to like race this particular week. That was like 3 years of working with the coach and developing her game every single day to get to this place of total accumulation of those thoughts and ideas that got put together for a great race execution. And so like being committed that way, you know, everybody knows Zoe works a lot, and this is running isn't her only job. It's part of what she does. And so you can do these things while you also do other stuff. It doesn't have to be like this all in approach to be committed. It's all about just like, you know, I'm really great at being good 60% of the time. Like I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to try not to be judgmental. If I'm judgmental today, you know, I'll do better tomorrow. Every day is a learning opportunity. I'm not going to overemphasize, you know, I think that at least for me, overemphasizing talent is a really easy way to underperform.
I think that, yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to mention is that the people that I see that are over reliant in a belief on talent underperform in the long run. The person I would be most stoked to race is someone who thinks they're talented, because I will work them into the ground over the course of a season and years, right? Like, I don't care how talented you are. I'll keep showing up and training 5-6 days a week, taking my rest days seriously. Like, I will keep showing up. Like, that beats talent most of the time.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as an incredibly talented person, but I'm very, very good at just like putting my shoes on most days and running easy when I'm supposed to.
Zoe, I'm curious, and I know you're going to go somewhere great with this, but there is an important, I think, aspect to this question about life circumstances that I want to make sure that we have time to hit before we run out of time here. I think, you know, honestly, life circumstances, yes, of course, they really do play into how you're able to reach your potential, what your commitment level will be, and what your competitiveness will be. If we gloss over that, I think that we're not doing a good job as coaches who take a holistic approach to training.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I always really try to acknowledge my privilege and like the fact that I wouldn't be able to do any of this if it wasn't for like your support and a lot of other life circumstances. You know, like we see people go through some really challenging things, and you just have to take those into account. I don't think you have like every life challenge doesn't, or life circumstance, if it, you know, whatever it is, that doesn't have to be like a thing that keeps you from becoming elite, right? Like I think, you know, particularly looking at the women's top 10 at Western States, like half those women have full-time jobs, you know, like that's freaking incredible. They're moms, they're parents. I think it's pretty different when you look at the men's field, and I have some other thoughts on that. But like you can have challenging life circumstances. You can have a life that maybe looks different than what we imagine a pro athlete's life looks like. And you can achieve incredible things, you know, like you can stand on the Western States podium if you put in the work. You know, definitely the women that are podiuming at Western States probably, you know, physiologically have some advantages. I'm sure like maybe their muscle composition, potentially the capillaries on their lungs, like from birth, they're probably a little bit different than the average bear. However, like none of that would matter if you didn't show up and put in the work. So like, yes, there are life circumstances. Like if you have a kiddo and you're not sleeping, like that's going to be a challenge, and pretending that's not a challenge helps no one.
Yeah, especially
I don't know if that answers things.
Yeah, no, I think that does. And I think that's just important to recognize people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, you know, are going to be able to access the resources that can help you to achieve your goals in different ways. Some people have more access than others. You know, obviously that does play a factor in this. And if it was a completely equal playing field for everybody, you know, the work and the commitment level would obviously probably be the biggest thing. But for a lot of the athletes that we coach, you know, some people are just unable to do 5 runs every single week, or sometimes they have to bike because they have to watch their kids, and all of these things. And I think that with the right support, you can make any of those circumstances work for you. And if you're patient with your goals, patient with yourself, and willing to kind of cultivate your passion and your commitment rather than go all in at once and expect everything at once, You know, it can really help to, I think, separate some of the adversity that people have in their lives that can make it difficult to train every single day or put barriers up to consistency. If you're willing to work with that stuff and maybe push your goals out a little bit, or just be more patient with all of how everything kind of works in this linear fashion, and recognize that that's not exactly true. I think that, you know, there's no reason you couldn't be committed or competitive or more, and more than that, you know.
I think like the biggest difference I see between mid pack athletes and front pack athletes is just like, how many days have you shown up to put in the work? Like that is literally, and this is, you know, this is different than like that like 5% genetic advantage that you probably need to like podium at Western States. But like in the context of the athletes we coach, it's like, how many days are you willing to put in the work and trust the process? And like, how many years can you do that for? Because like, if you are, I think this is like the struggle I have, is like identifying as a very hard worker who has like a lot of grit. It's very hard for me to not be like, I'm all in for just 1 month. I have to be like mostly in for like my whole life, you know, and that's the struggle.
Yeah, right. I think that's definitely, I think a lot of people on the team can resonate with that though. And I see a lot of athletes who set these like huge lofty goals. It's like, first year working with the coach, I'm racing UTMB. And I'm, you know, that's a really lofty goal for an athlete who just started running in 2019, you know, or 2020. And it's all good. And I'm going to do my best to support you. But realizing that it's okay to, you know, think about your goals in 3 years or 5 years or 10, especially if you're somebody who's working a lot. You've got childcare that is a barrier for how consistent you can be with training. If you have other health things going on, you know, all of these things, you know, if discussed with the coach and you're open to, you know, having kind of an adult discussion about it, you can probably find a track to get to those big lofty goals. But you don't have to fit it all in, you know, this month, this week, today, this year. I've personally found for myself, as I become maybe more of a business owner than even an athlete. And I think it's sometimes crazy to realize that, because I set out on all this stuff to be an athlete. But like, as your life circumstances change, it's okay for your goals to change too. And if you give yourself a little bit of that break and you're not judgmental about it, you can really still excel, and even improve, kind of along your journey towards like those big goals. Yeah, I hope we answered this question
It's a big
in
one.
a
I feel like we could
satisfactory
talk
way.
for an hour about grit.
Totally.
We
did. We have. Yeah, I would recommend, I think it was,
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact month, but it was last summer. We did a Zoom call on grit and perseverance. But I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, I don't even think we begin to cover it, but
No,
and
there's a lot to unpack.
Who is it? And Angela Duckworth. She has a great book on grit. I think this is what the author of this question is probably referring to. Keep plugging away, keep grinding away, guys. You are going to do so great. Fun. Yeah. Prioritize fun.
Yes.
But also prioritize specific training. Ideally, your specific training is fun. You know, that's where we're trying to get.
It's a balance.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Happy Monday.
Yep, we got to pack some boxes. But we will not be having a call Friday, but look forward to doing 3 or 4 more questions next Monday.
Yay.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week.